Okay, so we're going to take a look at the scientific method. We're going to apply what we've learned in terms of the different terms and whatnot to this situation. So I was really disappointed about my plants this summer. They didn't grow as well as I wanted them to. So I went down to the local store like a Home Depot or an Ace Hardware, and I did some research and I came across this fertilizer. We'll just call it Brand X. And it says that Brand X is going to really help my plants grow really tall. And if they grow tall, I'm assuming they're going to be healthier, produce more vegetables and more fruits and flower better and all of those things. Maybe it's not true, but that's what we're going to go with. So I've got Brand X fertilizer here, and I want to know if it's going to help my plants grow. So let's see who's paying attention. What question did I just mention, or what's my problem? Jaden.
You don't know why your plants are growing, so you got fertilizer?
That was my initial problem, and I did some research, and it led me to another problem, right? Cordelia.
Your plants weren't growing as well as you wanted them to?
Yes, but then I focused my problem even more, right? What did you hear me say?
I don't know if you
Will Brand X fertilizer uh, make my plants grow taller? Okay, will Brand X fertilizer make my plants grow taller? That's my question. Okay? So, what should I do? How should I test this? How should I test this? What do you think, Catherine?
you could like use a fertilizer on like some of the plants, and not like all of them, and then see if it grows better.
Oh, I only have one planter on here, but you want me to, you're way ahead. You want me to get a couple of groups of plants? Why can't I just put fertilizer on this one plant?
Because you won't know if it will grow better or not.
Why not?
Because there's nothing to compare to.
Because there's nothing to compare it to. Excellent. Excellent. Wow, you get a, wow. That was quite a response there. Way to go, class. Okay. So this plant is going to get fertilizer. Okay? And what Catherine is saying is that even if I give this plant fertilizer and it grows, right? We don't know that it wasn't going to grow anyway. We don't know that it's growing better than a plant without fertilizer because we don't have anything to compare it to. So what I would need to have is another group. So I'm going to try to draw the same flower as best I can. I don't know how that's going to work, but imagine it's fairly close to being the same flower. And there we go. We've got a second group. So let's see who's paying attention. Rihanna, what should I do to this group? What I'm giving this plant fertilizer. What should I do with this plant?
Don't give any fertilizer.
So we're going to call this the no fertilizer group. Now, I want to see if you're paying attention to previously what we've been talking about in terms of which of these would be considered the experimental group and which would be the control group. So we're going to vote. Okay? Everyone's going to vote. So put one finger up if you think that this is the experimental group. Put two fingers up if you think it's the control group.
Wait, which one? Fertilizer.
Very good. This is the experimental group. Please tell the person next to you why it is the experimental group.
You're putting the fertilizer on.
Okay, who thinks they heard a good answer? It's your answer, so she heard the answer. Abigail.
You said that one's being treated and then the other one's not being treated.
So this is the experimental group because this is being treated. When we say treated, what do we mean? It's getting the fertilizer, and I guess what I'm asking is, what variable is that? Because this helps you identify which is your experimental group. What variable is fertilizer considered? Let's vote. Is it 1 finger, the independent or manipulated variable, 2 fingers, the dependent or responding variable, 3 fingers, a controlled variable? Go ahead and vote. Okay, this is considered because it's getting the fertilizer. It's considered the the manipulated or controlled variable. The independent or manipulated variable. And that's how you really identify the experimental group. Because we say, oh, it's the one we want to experiment with, right? And when experiment with means we're going to give it that manipulated variable. Remember, manipulate means to change. The only thing we're changing between these two groups is that we're going to give this plant fertilizer. This one we're not giving fertilizer to. So let's just fill these things in. So what group? Call it out loud, class. What group is this? The control group. Good. And so true or false? 1 finger true, 2 fingers false. This group also gets the independent variable. 1 finger true, 2 fingers false. This group also gets the independent variable. The answer is false. We already said this is called a no fertilizer group, right? It's the control group. We're leaving it alone. And leaving it alone does not mean we don't do anything to it, because I'm hoping you realize that we need to make sure a lot of things stay the same between these two groups. So we'll talk about what those things are in a minute. But again, we leave it alone in the sense that we're not going to manipulate it like we're doing with this group. Now, I do need to keep a lot of things the same. There's a lot of terms of control, by the way. This is the control group. We have controlled variables, and the whole experiment's called a controlled experiment. Let's start with the broadest term, the controlled experiment. This is a controlled experiment because we are trying to control the conditions as much as possible so that any effects are due to our manipulated variable, which in this case is if we give the plant fertilizer. Okay? So, what variable is missing that we haven't talked about yet? Or variables, I should say. You're right, we didn't list the dependent variable yet. We'll get to that in a minute. What's the other variable we didn't list? Uns. The responding variable is the dependent variable. We didn't list that one yet. All right, let's talk about it. Since you brought it up, how do we describe a dependent variable or the responding variable? It's the variable you're going to what? You're not changing it, you change the manipulated variable. The variable you're going to one of the ways to think is the variable you're going to measure. It's the one that's going to respond. So what's going to respond or be measured if we give a plant fertilizer and a plant no fertilizer? What are we going to measure? Olivia. How much they grow. And that'll be called the what? The height. Right? So the height, so the dependent or responding variable is the height. That's how we're going to measure the growth. We want to know if they grow taller, and that's going to be measured in height. Okay? So now that we have the independent listed and the dependent, what's the third type of variable or variables that we haven't talked about yet? All right. A little comedy relief. Well, what is it? Can I take this plant and grow this plant in the classroom, this plant outside? They have to be in the same place. What do I call that? Controlled variables. So what? Please tell each other what the controlled variables are. Go ahead. Talk about them.
Where you keep them? Oh, the type of flower. If it's day or night.
Keep talking about them, call them out, whatever you want.
The type of flower. Time of day.
Type of flower, location, amount of water, amount of sunlight, not the amount of fertilizer, because that's my manipulated variable, right? I'm giving this group fertilizer, this group no fertilizer. The type of container. Okay, I think that's good. We could keep listing lots and lots of things, but you get the idea that everything else about these has to be the same. The type of flower, the location we grow them in, the amount of water we give them, the amount of sunlight, the type of container we grow them in. That's all very, very important. One thing I want to notice here is notice that my variables are listed very specifically. If I just said the flower, would that be a controlled variable? No, because I wouldn't know what aspect of the flower you were talking about, and thus that would always be marked wrong if you were ever using that as an answer. So make sure you're specific, because people do that all the time. They'll say like water. Well, what does that mean? You mean the type water or the amount of water you want to give it? You could actually do both, right? I give one tap water and one mineral water, that wouldn't really be effective. So that the type of water as well as the amount of water would be controlled variables. But so you always want to be specific so that people know what you're talking about. All right, so this looks pretty good. So am I ready to do an experiment now that I've identified everything? No, why not? I did research. I went to Home Depot and I looked it up and I found out this is going to work, or I think it's going to work. What's my hypothesis? Brand X fertilizer will make my plants grow taller. Okay, good. Am I ready now? One finger yes, two fingers no. We ready to do an experiment? What do you want to do, Uns? We could write a procedure out. We could do all that. We're not going to do a full lab write-up. So let's say we did all that. Are we ready now? Yeah. Okay. So I give this group of plants fertilizer. I give this group of plants no fertilizer. They grow. And this group grows less tall than this group. Please tell the person next to you what your conclusion should be. Ryan, what should my conclusion be? Plant with the fertilizer did not grow as well as the plant that did not get fertilizer. The plant without the fertilizer grew. No, the no fertilizer group grew taller. The fertilizer does not help my plants grow taller. Now, that would be a conclusion you would make from this experiment. But I want to focus on one thing. I only drew one flower here and one flower there, which means I only used one flower for this group and one flower for that group. Is my experiment valid? One finger, yes. Two fingers, no. Is my experiment valid? I only used one plant in the fertilizer group and one plant in the no fertilizer group. And because this group grew taller, I concluded that my fertilizer doesn't work. Is that a fair and valid statement? One finger, yes. Two fingers, no. Please tell the people next to you why that is not a valid statement. You want to talk about it? All right, Ens, go ahead. If we had more plants, we could get more results. Please go ahead and stand up for a minute, please, everyone. Go ahead and stand up. I want you to look at all of the different heights we have in the room. Do you think you all grow at the same rate? No. Okay. So, would you say that part of the reason that you grow at different rates could be because you all eat different things, you take care of yourself differently? But could you also say that no matter what you do, some of you are just going to grow taller than others? Would that be a fair statement? Okay, have a seat. Would the same thing be true of plants? So is it possible? Who thinks they're short in here? You know you are? All right, Jade. Let's have fun. And who thinks they're tall in here? Dominic's pretty tall, and so Sarah. Okay. So, hey, bud. Right after Exxon. All right. So, let's pretend this was a Jaden flower, and this was a Sarah flower. Would it be fair to say that possibly, no matter how much fertilizer I gave the Jaden flower is just not going to grow as tall as the Sarah flower because the Sarah flower just inherently grows at a faster rate? Would that make sense? Okay. What do you need? Yeah. So how do we fix this? Well, Un said that we could use more samples. So now I take this experiment, I do it over, but this time I have 100 flowers in this group, and I have 100 flowers in this group. I give all the 100 flowers fertilizer, these 100 flowers no fertilizer, and I compare the growth after 2 months of growth. I average all of the heights, all of the growth from this group, and I compare it to the averaged heights from all the plants in this group. Now is my experiment valid? Much more valid than it was the first time, because by including a larger sample size, you get rid of all of those individual differences that are always going to exist in any population that you do these kinds of experiments on. So your results become more reliable. And I heard people talking about other things. Well, maybe there wasn't enough fertilizer used. Maybe that it was the type of plant used. Those are all valid arguments. But the most important thing you always want to realize is that you need to have a large enough sample size to make the experiment valid. Any questions about this?